Thank you so much, Rob. And yeah, good morning to everybody. Good to see so many people here, although I can only see like half the room because the lights are so bright. But yeah, thanks for being here so early in the morning. I had to set like a few alarms myself just to make sure I wake up. We're going to start you off with like a kind of a serious note today. My co-author Ritika and I will be talking about a study into the network changes that happened in Russia during the invasion into Ukraine in 2022. This work is a big collaborative effort from a lot of people, a lot of amazing folks across academia, the internet freedom field, and industry partners who all came together in a time of need.
Geopolitical conflicts can lead to increased restrictions on information flow, and that is precisely what we saw in Russia as well. So in the weeks following Russia's escalation of the invasion in 2022, we saw foreign governments impose sanctions on Russia, companies withdrawing their services from the country, increased restrictions in terms of censorship within Russia, and Russian citizens trying to get around such restrictions using circumvention methods. And all of these actions, both by Russia and by foreign actors, threatened internet freedom in multiple different ways. First, censorship and BGP withdrawals in Russian ISPs prevent Russian users from accessing critical content, including news and messaging around the war. And when Russian citizens turned to circumvention methods, they were caught in a cat and mouse game between the censors and the circumvention community, where both sides tried to outpace each other. And the isolation of Russian citizens was exacerbated by the fact that both Russia as well as foreign service providers started blocking access to users based on geolocation. And that's a phenomenon that's been called geoblocking. And the foreign service providers did this both because of government sanctions from their respective countries, but also in some cases for moral signaling. Finally, two major certificate authorities withdrew their services from Russia and refused to issue new certificates to Russian domains and Russian TLDs, thus leading to the rise of a domestic certificate authority. Now, all of these restrictions, both from Russia as well as foreign actors, increased the digital divide, isolating Russian citizens further and enabling Russia to have a more control over the messaging around the war. And in general, this contributed to the splintering of the internet. Now, in this work, we've performed a systematic study of the different types of network restrictions that were observed following the invasion. But conducting such a multifaceted study is fraught with a lot of challenges, like obtaining and synthesizing multi-perspective data from varied data sources about internet restrictions. While there are established platforms for studying some types of restrictions, like censorship, for example, others, such as geoblocking and the study of domestic certificate authorities, require the development of new measurement methods. Moreover, there are also multiple types of restrictions that were at play, such as like censorship and geoblocking, which have similar but compounding effects. So differentiating between them is a big challenge. So in our study, we basically overcome each of these challenges. We collect and process data from 9 independent data sources. We create new measurement tools that are open source for measuring geoblocking. And we understood domestic certificate authorities and created measurements for those. And we ran our measurements from diverse vantage points. So now Ram will go over the measurements and how we studied them and our results. Perfect.
Thank you, Ritika. So I have about 8 minutes left. I'm going to speed run through a lot of our work here. So in this work, we tried to measure geoblocking of both Russian users by foreign services as well as foreign users by Russian services. So we built an open source tool that we call GeoInspector that can identify geoblocking at different stages of an internet connection, such as during the DNS request, the TCP handshake, the HTTP request, etc. So to detect DNS geoblocking, for example, GeoInspector sends multiple iterative DNS queries to each name server on the DNS resolution chain, thus helping it identify the exact point at which the failure occurs, the exact name server that refuses to respond. At the same time, we also run measurements from other countries as a control measurement to ensure that the failures are only being observed for a few users from a certain region. After the DNS stage, GeoInspector then performs geoblocking measurements at the TCP level, where we usually expect to see a TCP reset or a timeout, and during the HTTP request as well, where usually there's a page that's sent back by the web service saying the service is unavailable in your region. There's a slight problem here, though, in that the same errors such as a TCP reset or a TCP timeout could also be caused by censorship systems within the country. And actually, with the limited information that's available in protocols such as TCP, differentiating between different types of restrictions such as censorship and geoblocking is a very challenging phenomenon. So in our work, we used and adapted this tool that we call CentRace that sends multiple TTL-limited probes to identify the exact network location at which the failure happens. So if you see that the failure happens close to the user within the country, then it's most likely because of censorship. And if it happens close to the service provider, then it's most likely because of geoblocking. So using GeoInspector and CentRace, we sent measurements to about 600 Russian government websites and about 8,000 popular domains from our 4 Russian vantage points. And unfortunately, we saw a lot of geoblocking. So first, we found significant levels of geoblocking of foreign users by Russian government domains, a phenomenon that we call geofencing, because these domains are basically only available within Russia. So around 25% of the domains that we tested were only accessible from Russia. They weren't accessible from any other country that we tested. And another interesting phenomenon that we observed is that another 20% of domains were only accessible from Russia and Kazakhstan. And this shows us that Russian services might be treating neighboring countries like Kazakhstan a little differently. We saw that most domains failed to establish a TCP connection, or they sent back a page indicating geoblocking, and many of them even stated that they were doing this because of concerns of denial of service attacks, which were very common during the conflict. So looking at the other side, we also found that many popular domains geoblock Russian and Kazakhstan users. So around 160 domains were not available in only Russia, so they were accessible from every other country. And interestingly enough, another 67 domains were unavailable from Russia and Kazakhstan. So again, we're seeing the same pattern, and these two countries were significantly more geoblocked than any other country that we ran tests from. And again, most of these websites served a page indicating the reason behind geoblocking, and frequently these are template error pages from CDNs such as Cloudflare. And we find that shopping websites, education websites, and even news domains block access to Russian users, thus isolating them further.
So to go one step further, we wanted to confirm that these restrictions are indeed new and because of the invasion. So our measurements began as a result of the escalation and therefore only after the fact. So we had to investigate if we can leverage historical data sources. So that's exactly what we did. We looked at sources like census and the Internet Archive to get a good idea of when the geoblocking began. So like the figure shows here, these historical data sets were able to record clearly when most of these domains stopped being accessible. And they had scans almost every day before the invasion, and they revealed that most of the geoblocking started almost immediately after the invasion started or escalated at the end of February. And they were also accessible before that point.
So I'm sure you're wondering what else happened in Russia. So when the invasion started, many certificate authorities in the West stopped issuing certificates to Russian domains. And all this did, in fact, is just make internet traffic in Russia more insecure. And in reaction, Russia developed their own domestic certificate authority. And from a security standpoint, we were worried if these certificates could be used for surveillance, which we've already seen in neighboring Kazakhstan back in 2019. So we wanted to see whether the CA had received adoption. We ran measurements using the Chrome and Yandex browsers to the list of domains that are officially signed by the certificate. And we observed that around 114 domains were presenting the domestic certificate in the Yandex browser. And around 46 of these domains had a recently expired certificate from another trusted CA. So this shows that the certificate is slowly but surely getting more adoption, and this might force Russian users away from browsers like Chrome and Firefox that don't trust this domestic certificate. And apart from running our own measurements, we also used data from public sources to study things as censorship increases. So we used data from censorship observatories like CensorPlanet and UNI to show that popular domains like Facebook, Twitter, and even news domains like BBC were almost completely blocked in all ISPs in Russia. And we also saw from data sources like IOTA and route views that some ISPs even attempted BGP withdrawals and hijacks as a censorship measure. Finally, we worked together with the circumvention community to understand increases in their use, as well as their own internal conflict with the Russian censors. So data from Siphon, for instance, showed that Siphon usage kept increasing exponentially as more domains were blocked in Russia. Also, some protocols used by Siphon were blocked in a centralized manner around March 2022 in almost all ISPs, and other protocols had to be introduced to continue serving traffic. The Tor network, surprisingly enough, was blocked 2 months before the invasion started, possibly as a preventive precaution. So most of the default bridges were blocked immediately, and many of the non-default obfuscated bridges were progressively discovered and blocked. And the Tor website was unavailable as well. So in summary, through the synthesis of data from multiple data sources and the collection of our own measurements, our study reveals the extent of restrictions on internet freedom in Russia during the period of the conflict that are caused both by domestic actors as well as foreign actors. And we highlight that we need to equip existing measurement platforms with techniques to extend their monitoring beyond that of nation-state censorship. Our study is a cautionary tale for internet freedom that describes how the landscape of internet restrictions is changing rapidly, with an array of private actors joining a growing number of government actors in implementing online controls. And we worry that this will lead to a highly splintered and fractured internet where users have a completely different experience online based on the region that they're connecting from. So before I finish, like Rob said, I'm on the academic job market. So if you know of any opportunities in your department, please let me know. And yeah, that's our presentation. So thank you so much for listening.